But we had not been subject to prevailing wage rates, but we are now. So they have had some successes there.
When did that change?
1990s.
So from the layperson, it seems like the school facility is part of the state government, which I understand they're so distinct. But would you be collaborating with the rest of the state to try to get the facility in New Bedford ready, or kind of just wait for someone else to do it and then say, okay, now we have an opportunity to use it?
We have been preoccupied with running the boat line for the last year and a half or so. But we had been on a path of developing, our proposal is how we would do it, and saying that it's a regional transportation problem, and let's everyone get together and try to talk about it. We haven't been able to keep up that pace because of everything else that's going on.
So a plan that would be helpful.
I'm just saying, we have too many,
There's no,
Bob now.
stuck in the water.
What did you say, pay us?
Pace.
Another question
No,
about
pace.
the RFP idea. So now, I know we've always said that the state pier would be the most likely place to function from, and maybe the north terminal might become more viable later. But what if the RFP went out and you found out that there are other people like Mr. Packer out there that have capabilities that we're not aware of that might take up my offer?
We did a survey, so to speak. I was in the boat myself. That's where attorneys usually do their best work. Why I was doing it, but that's all right.
Usually it's like a tuna fishing boat.
Right. We went with Ed and Washburn, our port council member from New Bedford.
Boston Rail or something.
Boston Rail, and Maura Tierney was also in that boat. That was with Wayne. And we went up and down the waterfront and looked at all the possibilities. I think that was in our report
Okay.
as to all the other. We went through the Maritime Commerce Terminal down there. New Bedford doesn't prefer us not to use that because they have their sites on the wind turbines, I guess. But we talked about that. Doesn't have a transfer bridge. It wasn't built for one. It has a bulkhead, but that's the one owned by Mass Development, and they spent $100 million on that. And it may cost less to put in a transfer bridge there than it would to rehabilitate the state pier, because the state pier, our understanding, and again, we haven't looked at this for now at least a year, but our understanding is that the state pier was being condemned, and that the area where the transfer bridge is, which is a beautiful, long, 100-foot transfer bridge, trucks can't get over the pier to get there.
Currently, no.
And so what was needed to be done, there was strong disagreement about who was responsible for the state pier, who should be doing it. New Bedford Port Authority was not in control. It was Conservation and Recreation. It's now Mass Development. And they
Under
went,
DCR.
right. And then the last we heard, they went out with an RFP to get a consultant
They've hired someone.
and hired someone else, or?
They hired someone in December.
Okay, just last month?
Yes.
Because that RFP was a year ago.
It took them, well, I think they were hiring over the summer. It took them a while.
Okay, so to find out what is the best use of the state pier. That's the last we heard.
Right.
So now we've heard a little bit more, but,
Well, I'm sorry, this was their employee that's going to be the director of the Marine, the Mass Development was, is that what you're asking, or you're asking something else?
Mass Development, my memory is that.
They had a job search.
Not a job search. This was for an outside consultant to come in, and this was more than a year ago, because Craig Johnson, I think, also had submitted a proposal but was not selected. And that was certainly when I was still employed here, so, but it's full-time. And the consultant was to tell them what the best use of the state pier would be. And I don't know what happened to that. Then the New Bedford Port Authority, which now they call themselves, the Port Authority, they rebranded. And they put out a plan a year ago in which they downplayed the possibility of using the state pier for a vehicular ferry terminal. They like foot passengers because it brings more people, and they were promoting the north terminal.
Right.
And, you know, in some ways, if it's a private operator, we don't care as much, but the North Terminal has problems with the bridge.
Right.
I mean, I don't mean to be
That's their long
negative.
range. No,
Yeah, I know.
that's their long range best
Right,
approach.
right, right.
Yeah.
And then, but the bridge itself, they say, in that same report, they say they need either $50 million to repair it or $100 million to replace it.
Long range, but
Long
still,
range.
Mr. Packard comes and goes, and a lot of
Yeah.
people do.
Yeah.
But another
No.
perspective is by putting the RFP out, you wouldn't have to solve all of these problems, and maybe you're right, you wouldn't get any responses, but I mean, there are other ways of getting people back and stuff back and forth. Fast ferries, which you're not, you know, engaged in, at least on the Vineyard route, and there might be some other solutions. To me, that project feels completely dead in the water and waiting for mass development or waiting. And I know you're overtaxed, but to us, it feels like a.
Has anybody gotten serious
stop
enough on an RFP to ask you if you can guarantee them that there won't be any problems on your docks, the docks that you control?
No, and I don't think we could, as a public authority charged with our mission, make that assurance to them. I think that if there were ever a problem, we would always have to have first priority for our operations. We do have dockage agreements where people enter into the dockage agreements to make use of our facilities, and they always acknowledge that if there is any problem with our facilities, they have no remedy against us, and that we get first priority.
I'm
Thankfully.
talking about union issues.
Oh, union,
principally.
I'm sorry, union
Okay,
issues.
yeah.
Yes, we dealt with those issues over the years as well, and I think
I
those.
read your annual report and I see a lot of pension and, commitments.
Correct. So for the union issues, we have worked out all of those problems with our respective unions. We did have a huge arbitration when we did the Seabulk pilot freight service from New Bedford, where the unions wanted to be able to have jurisdiction over the operation of those boats. But we were able to prevail on that arbitration.
You were.
Yes.
Good.
And so we resolved that, and there hasn't been any union issues since then in our terminal employees working with boats that come in that we don't own ourselves
Yeah.
or operate.
Okay, good.
So,
Who owns that car ramp at the state pier? New Bedford, the state, is that state?
I don't know. I assume it's all the state.
That was DCR.
Yeah, I think it's all
That's what I would
DCR.
guess, yeah.
But my memory,
They've given the management of the facility over to Mass Development.
but
Right.
my memory
They're
of
still the
that,
overarching owner, right?
that's when George Lentier was solicitor of the city of New Bedford.
Mhm.
They were looking aggressively, is a nice word to say, to have us operate from New Bedford. And my understanding, my memory of my understanding, not only is my memory bad, but my understanding may have been faulty from the first place, is that that transfer bridge was no longer needed for the Big Dig, that they had some type of ferry service during the construction in that phase. And so George Lentier was able to get it and bring it down to the state pier.
Mhm.
Whether he got it by means of the city of New Bedford owning it, or whether he was just facilitating it for DCR, I don't know. I just don't know, but that's my,
I heard another version, but I heard that someone appealed to Ted Kennedy, and that was thanks to his, but maybe he twisted an arm at the Big Dig.
I don't know. My understanding is that it came from the Big Dig, after it was no longer need there. But, at the Steamship Authority, we get a lot of rumors, maybe 5% are true, but at least that's a 5% improvement rate. Okay.
So I'd like to steer us back to finish up with question 4, briefly if we can.
Okay.
There's concern about expansion, concern on the islands, concern here. All indications look like expansion will continue, expansion of the schedule and of traffic based on sort of the historical increase in boat runs and car and truck traffic over the last, really forever, certainly over the last 20 years. the fully functioning third slip. And I know you stated there are limitations, but I think people are very concerned about it nonetheless.
I mean,
And I guess people are looking for reassurance that the Steamship Authority isn't planning to expand more boats, more traffic. Because I think the island and certainly here, we feel like we're really maxed out with traffic capacity, overmaxed.
we don't have any plans to expand, but I can't give you any assurance that we won't expand. I mean, we're in the mode where we're responding to the traffic. And at this point, we have our schedules. They've only changed, for the last, with the addition of the fifth freight boat on the weekdays. Could I see that going to 7 days a week? I could, but are we planning that? We are we? Okay, okay. I mean,
So really, it's pretty open-ended.
it's open-ended, and
That's not much of an assurance.
no, I told you, I can't give it to you, so.
I'd be kicking you.
So it sounds like there was an assurance in 1999. There was a 5-town referendum.
97.
Well, the reference point was 97. I think the referendum was
Was it?
the year or two later. There was a consensus, at least on the Vineyard part, and I think Falmouth was involved to some extent as well. How did, for our benefit, if you were to commit to an assurance, a reassurance to limit traffic, how did that go so wrong from the perspective of limiting automobiles to the Vineyard?
How did that,
To the 1997
It's
one.
1997.
how it went off the
Those
rails? so to
but those
speak?
not non-binding?
Yeah.
It's non-binding.
Yes, but there was a political will at that moment
It was a
to
political,
implement that, yet
well.
you look at nothing happened, except for the New Bedford run, but.
Well, there was an attempt, and this is my subjective memory, and so I was there. You can read the minutes of the board meetings then. I think you have, I don't know how many we have. You have seen both our Ron Rappaport at the time and Grace Gressman at the time trying to help, and especially Ron at that time, because Grace was more worried about Nantucket. This was Martha's Vineyard issue. Trying to implement it and figure out a way. We engaged the Cambridge Systematics report, in order to come and try to do something from New Bedford, and try to limit it. And it got lost in the gunfire between New Bedford and the island. It just, you needed to have a discussion of people with goodwill to sit down and say, what are the problems, how are the issues, how can they be resolved without hurting people and without hurting more people. You needed to have that type of discussion. And that started with the Cambridge Systematics report, and the day that report was given, there were threats, and people went back into their respective camps. It's just, I don't know how else to explain it. It was a horrible time for everyone associated with the steamship authority. It was just, to have a discussion of what are the needs. To have a limitation of cars on the island requires more than just stopping or limiting service. You have to have some substitute form of transportation. Well done. The RTA, the BTA is terrific at this point. It's much better than it was then. But there was, the Martha's Vineyard Commission had a traffic or transportation committee that had the whole plan, and that started, and that got, subsumed in all of this battle.
That kind of has to come from the island, doesn't it? Don't they have to say they only will let so many cars be on the island? And
Well, yes, we would have to look, as I said.
you're just delivering.
We're delivering. It's a complicated issue. There's some concern on the island that, well, if you're going to limit cars, who are you going to limit? Who's going to file a claim? It's going to be discriminatory. How are you going to do that? That's not to say it cannot be done. It just has to be done with a lot of thought and a lot of planning. And that's, we're short on the planning. I was going to say.
Planner.
Yeah.
The planner.
The planner.
No, we're short. You have to think there are other areas. Catalina Island, my understanding that doesn't allow cars on. So how do they do it? It's not that large.
They do have ferry service.
They have a ferry. You know,
And a
just-
lot of boats go there.
Right.
Independent.
It's not that developed.
Correct.
No.
I mean, it's,
Economic.
you know,
That's right.
but you would look at those places, you'd look at other places, you'd see how they do it, how they address that. I would love to have that job assignment to go to the island of Capri, see how they do it, go to the, you know, Mallorca, you know, just, you know.
Ischia, Ischia.
And we're all gonna
Be
volunteer.
retired, you can do that, Steve.
No, but I mean, it's just, it's not,
Field trip.
This is
you know,
what kind of
but
is
we're here
economic
trying
right
to
now.
provide the service,
Yeah.
and that's a whole, you know, Armin DeVario got in, because he developed this service model, you know, practically on his own, and then presented it to the Martha's Vineyard community pretty much the same way, you know, you're talking about, and they railed against it, you know. It was, it has to come out. Yeah, it has to grow out instead of being imposed.
Right.
So,
And
sorry, what's the intention of authority by advertising its services to the public, like billboards and South the Expressway and 195 and other
Yeah.
ads?
I think we have to, I said this the last time, for the most part, on the Nantucket route, we have Highline as a huge competitor. We have a high-speed boat of our own, and the airlines. I keep on forgetting the airlines because we've really done pretty well against the airlines. We have the high-speed boat. We are increasing that schedule with the high-speed boat, so it's not as if we're doing more trips with the high-speed boat. But we want to increase our market share as opposed to the number of tourists going over, so that we pay for it. Pardon?
Just to maintain.
Just to maintain our
That's
market
a
share,
challenge.
to maintain that expenses and do it. That's primarily for the Nantucket route. And so we are promoting the island as a destination. We're saying if you're going to the island, use us. For this route, that is more what we should focus on in terms of what we're saying. I don't think, but I don't know because I haven't been following it, that the advertisements are to promote the trip, just that if you're going to go, use us. Because for us, I mean, most of the difficulty are the trucks, you know, sometimes the cars. At the moment, you know, our plan, which has worked out as well as, you know, was to take the parking, move it further and further away from downtown. So the passengers that come on our boats now are Thomas B. Landers, and even still, and they impose less of a burden on the community than the other passengers. Ironically, that's where we often have most capacity, excess capacity in terms of passengers. It's called an hollow shell or an empty shell market, economic market. I've forgotten what exactly is the term.
Is that lot full all the time, the Thomas Landers one?
No, it's not. It's full a number of weekends during the summer, and during those weekends we park cars at. See, I'm not doing this anymore. This is where I don't have any history for this year.
I think we went 2 or 3 weekends this past year that we ended up going out to Katomet as well. So not only did we fill Thomas B. Landers, but we also
I know the
leased
Katomet
from the hockey rink,
Yeah,
and then we went out to.
yeah, that's where I live up there.
So in 1997, I mean, I was at the meeting in December of 1998, and fireworks came out, and, you know, that was, you know.
But wasn't it, because it was non-binding, kind of meaningless? Other than
Correct.
getting everybody to be on the same page?
But it was non-binding, so.
That's not meaningless, that, the
Well, I mean,
voters they may select their next selectman based on
But-
whether that's
Okay.
implemented or not.
But sometimes you have some referendum, you know, does everyone want fewer cars? Yes, but I want my car, you know? I
yeah,
don't want anyone
everything,
else's
sure.
car, but I want to get there. And we get that a lot as customers. And so you have a very, I won't say simplistic, but I just did, referendum that didn't think through all of the things that were bound in it. But it set an attitude of direction to the board, which if you read the minutes, Ron was strong in trying to get to. But it just went off the rails with all of the disputes. It was one accusation after another. I mean, I couldn't, you know, Galen Robbins took a vote that George Leontire did